All right, we really need to talk about Frogwares. This story is a couple days old. I'm a little late with it, but it's still relevant. Frogwares is an indie development studio that's worked on titles such as The Sinking City, a lot of the Sherlock Holmes adventure games, and while their games haven't taken the world by a storm per se, there are people who enjoy their releases. There is a niche community that really enjoy what Frogwares has to output. There's some clunkiness with their gameplay, but people enjoy the stories that they have to tell. Unfortunately, Frogwares is just in a really unlucky place. They've been afflicted by two separate publishers now who have screwed them over one way or another. And the latest publisher to do so is one going by the name Big Ben / Nacon. And in this statement published on August 25th, 2020, Frogwares explains why their latest release, The Sinking City, is being delisted, and a better version of that statement can be found on Frogwares' official Twitter accounts. This is the Sinking City Twitter account posting a tweet that says, "An important message from our studio, The Sinking City has been taken off Steam and from other platforms. The reason for the takedown is due to the actions of our distributor, BBI Nacon." Here's our full statement. The same statement can also be found on Frogwares' official Twitter page, and clicking on the image will reveal the statement in full. And I'm going to read this to you so that you get an idea for how Frogwares has been screwed over. It reads right here, "Hello everyone, as some of you have noticed, The Sinking City has been taken down from Steam and many other notable stores. We have received multiple emails and messages on this issue. The reason is a bit complicated, yet at the same time quite simple. Short version, we were forced to terminate the contract with our licensee for several breaches of our agreement. We urge you to read this open letter to our fans, journalists, and people of the industry to understand why this is happening and how you can still get The Sinking City. The following information contained in this letter is part of court proceedings, meaning that the information is now public and confidentiality rules do not apply anymore. Since the release of The Sinking City on June 27th, 2019, we have been involved in legal battles with Big Ben Interactive Nacon over the title. In 2017, we signed the Sinking City contract as a licensing agreement with Big Ben Nacon, 2 years after the start of production. In exchange for a financial contribution to the development, we gave them the right to sell and commercialize the game on 4 platforms: Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Steam, and later Epic Games Store. The intellectual property would still belong to Frogwares, this is important to note, which has always been the only producer and owner of its games, including The Sinking City. So while Big Ben Nacon had publishing rights, the rights to the IP still belong to Frogwares, but the way the publisher has been treating The Sinking City makes it seem as though they are the actual owners, even though that's not contractually the case. The statement continues, "We signed the deal on those terms and we would receive part payments for each production milestone completed, then a share of revenue starting at the first euro or dollar. So all was well until the collaboration started. During production, BBI Nacon was hundreds and hundreds of days behind in payments in total, each sum due on average being 40 days late, while our milestones were always on time and approved by the licensee. We had to issue formal notices multiple times so that we were able to receive the money that was owed to us." So when a publisher makes a deal with a developer, an indie developer no less, it is very important that they maintain their financial obligations, that they deliver payment on time, because these indie devs, they don't have a lot of money. They don't have time to wait for the payment to come in, 40 days late and stuff like that. This is already incredibly shady and already a sign of a relationship that wasn't gonna work out. But beyond all that, quote, "The lack of commitment to honor the financial obligations soon turned into ongoing pressure. Once BBI Nacon bought out a competing studio working on another Lovecraftian game, they dictated that we give them our source code for The Sinking City. Once again, BBI Nacon does not own the IP, they are a licensee. They sell the game, not develop and co-create it. After we refused to comply, we stopped receiving financial contributions for over 4 months. This publisher basically held the payment that they owed the indie studio hostage unless the indie studio that owns the rights to their video game gave the publisher their source code in order to enable another studio that the publisher had actually bought and gained ownership over. But it doesn't end there. Frogwares continued. This kind of unacceptable behavior took on other forms as well. With regard to the business plan, we were kept in the dark. We asked on multiple occasions to see sales forecasts, but the figures sent to us were not consistent. We weren't sure of how potential sales could turn out, meaning that we were not able to properly plan our future. Were there any sales deals arranged? We were not sure. Only the exclusivity agreement with Epic Games Store gave us some respite, as we knew what we would receive due to the minimum guarantees in Epic's contract. So obviously there's always going to be some controversy when a game goes Epic Store exclusive, but when it comes to indie developers, if they properly explain themselves, I can understand why they might take that deal. Again, indie developers aren't rich, they aren't swimming in money. It's a financial daily struggle for them to, maintain themselves as a company. And so for these indie studios, there are sort of scenarios in which I get why they took the deal, why they took that cash infusion, why it's ultimately necessary to complete the game and make sure that there is a level of financial stability so the developers can just worry about making the game and getting that out there. And especially in Frogwares scenario, I get why they went Epic exclusive when they have to deal with such an inconsistent, shady, downright manipulative, and egregious publisher. The Epic Games Store cash infusion safety net and them, needing that is 100% understandable. Frogwares then has a second page where they add additional context. On June 27th, 2019, The Sinking City was released on Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and Epic Games Store. That was a great day for us, and once the game was released, we received a letter from Big Ben Nacon that the milestones that were previously approved are being canceled, meaning that we would not receive any profit from the sales of the game. A retroactive cancellation on not delivering a product on time that is already out in the market is not acceptable. That was when our legal battle began. So there were certain terms that were set in stone on the contract itself about milestones that would lead to certain payments. And the publisher decided retroactively, we have decided that we no longer want to fulfill those milestones as stipulated in the contract. The statement continues, we filed a lawsuit against Big Ben Nacon on August 2019, and incidentally, only then we started to receive income reports, though incomplete and undocumented. So only under the pressure of a lawsuit, and judging by what Frogwares is saying here, it seems like Frogwares has a strong case here. Only under pressure of lawsuit did Frogwares begin to actually get some income reports, but even then it was done half-assedly, incomplete, and undocumented. Frogwares then adds, so it was not possible for us to see if the revenue was correctly calculated or even how many units we sold. At some point, we received a statement claiming that one of the console manufacturers hasn't paid royalties for more than 5 months, while actually the same console manufacturer paid our royalties from other games without any delay in the same period of time. Now, it isn't specified which console manufacturer. We could be talking about Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo, but the point is that the publisher claimed that, strange, it's been 5 months since we got royalties from this console manufacturer, that's why you're not being paid on time, except Frogwares noticed that they were being paid on time by that console manufacturer for all of their other games that aren't being published by Big Ben. It just so happens that the Big Ben published The Sinking City is the only game that royalties weren't being paid on time. So the suggestion is that Big Ben might be lying about this, that they were just kind of claiming this to cover their own asses for the lack of timely payment. The console manufacturer has been timely since as far as Frogwares remembers, whereas the publisher hasn't been one to be timely with payment, and the publisher is the one claiming that royalties have not been paid for more than 5 months by the console manufacturer. So you can understand why this draws a lot of suspicion. Furthermore, we were surprised to find that copyright notices on box covers and storefront pages were legally incorrect, creating a perception that it was not Frogwares which was the owner of the IP. Our Frogwares logo was removed from some of the PS4 and Xbox One games cover and other marketing materials, and we only were mentioned on the reverse side with the technical partners, again creating a perception that we're neither the authors nor the owners of the game. And there is actually proof of this. Here's a screenshot released by Frogwares showing how, if you look at the Sinking City box, only Big Ben is listed. The Frogwares logo should be right here, and you can also see in this screenshot showing eBay listings of the Xbox One version of the Sinking City that the logo is missing for Frogwares. It should be right here. If you find listings with the official box art of Sinking City, the official art shows the Frogwares logo, but any picture showing the box in people's hand, like this image, shows that the Frogwares logo is nowhere to be found. And I actually went to eBay to see if this was doctored any new way, but nope. Going through eBay right now, you'll see that any box images that are the physical box itself have no Frogwares logo anywhere here, both on the PS4 and Xbox One version. No logo here, no logo here, no logo here, no logo here. And then this one, which is the official box art, that has the actual logo. So this is what's advertised, but what's shipped does not actually contain the logo anywhere in the box. This feels very much like that whole Konami-Kojima situation where Konami removed Kojima's name from the art box and from marketing material. And then the statement adds, dozens of domain names for our Sherlock Holmes and the Sinking City brands were bought by Big Ben Nacon without notifying us. They're literally scalping these domain names out of the developers. A tabletop The Sinking City RPG was created without even informing us and distributed freely, featuring the wrong copyright notice. And you can also see that in this Google Drive folder where you can see the cover of the Sinking City Death May Die, this RPG, tabletop RPG. Frogwares is listed even though they never approved this, and as the owners of the IP, they're the ones who are able to approve or deny this, not Big Ben, who are again just a video game publishing partner. And then right here, if we zoom in, you can see the copyright notice that says Copyright 2019, Big Ben Interactive, instead of saying Frogwares, the actual copyright owners of the IP. Just like, what the hell? But there's more. Finally, when launching Nacon on the public market, the official stock market prospectus suggested that the intellectual property of the Sinking City was owned by BBI Nacon, while again the Sinking City is owned by Frogwares. And only by pure coincidence, we learned in February 2020 that the exclusivity contract with one of the storefronts was on the verge of being breached when there was an attempt to release a pirate version of the Sinking City on a third-party PC subscription service. We were forced to step in and prevent this from happening. I mean, this is just a shit show on the part of a publisher. When a developer and a publisher make a deal, the publisher has certain responsibilities that they have to fulfill. The reason indie publishers sign up with publishers is because they take off a lot of the responsibilities from the indie studio stuff, like marketing and distribution within certain legal confines, so that the indie studio can focus on actually just creating the game instead of thinking about all of these different facets that detract from that. But in this case, the publisher is just making everything more of a pain in the ass with late payments and breaches of contract, and them sort of engaging in hostile attempts to, acquire the IP, or that's the perception that's being given off, where they seem to pretend like they own the Sinking City when they in fact do not. In light of all of this, Frogwares adds that we try to contact Big Ben Nacon for 11 months and resolve these issues, but we have not received any satisfactory response from their representatives. So during a lengthy and exhausting legal battle, we finally decided to terminate the contract on April 20th, 2020 because of the numerous above mentioned issues. And Frogwares actually posted a screen grab of the contract and the termination clause, which can be read right here. The agreement may also be terminated in the event that the other party breaches any of its material obligations hereunder, which is indeed what happened. In such event, the first party may terminate this agreement automatically, I butcher that, after an effective period of 30 days following formal notice, if said breach has not been adequately cured within such period and without prejudice to damages and or any other remedies that may be claimed by the aggrieved party. And then Frogwares notes that Big Ben Interactive failed to cure the breach, and accordingly, the agreement automatically terminated on the 20th of April 2020, termination date, without further formality. Termination of right to exploit the game as a result of the termination of the agreement for the failure to remedy the breach. Any right or license that Big Ben Interactive or any third party had to publish the game and exploit the intellectual property rights therein has now terminated. Accordingly, Frogwares is now the only party permitted to publish and to authorize others to publish or otherwise exploit the game. Pretty straightforward. The publisher breached the terms of the contract in more ways than one. They no longer have the publishing rights. They should no longer be getting money from the game. They should no longer be selling the game. And they should no longer be getting any benefits from the title. But even this termination clause was something that the publisher could not uphold. Frogwares states, however, presented with all the evidence, there still came the coup de grace. In our email exchange, BBI Nacon essentially wrote that the contract cannot be terminated because of the emergency laws in France aimed to protect businesses during the pandemic, and at the same time, BBI Nacon refused to fulfill their obligations towards us, payment, documented reports, etc. So on top of being behind on their obligations, BBI Nacon tried to make the case that we still should be benefiting from your IP because the pandemic, which is just a BS reason, them exploiting sort of a world crisis in order to keep Frogwares' Sinking City IP prisoner, essentially, and for them to be able to exploit that IP however they want, even though they don't legally own it. And then Frogwares adds that the video game industry is one of the few spheres that flourished during the COVID crisis, and BBI Nacon's stock market communication largely supported this state of affairs. Turnover was up sharply at 15.7 million euros, thanks to the boom in digital sales, benefiting in particular from the lockdown effect, which boosted game sales. The latter were multiplied 2.7-fold over the period. So this is a direct quote indicating that BBI Nacon actually was doing well for itself, and the games industry as a whole is doing better for itself because people are holed up at home and they're buying a bunch of video games. So BBI Nacon has no real case with them saying that, oh, well, the whole pandemic situation means that we want to protect ourselves, and so we cannot terminate this contract because it might negatively affect our business. Like, they cannot use that excuse when they're actually thriving amidst the pandemic, as many other game companies are, because game sales and game console sales as a whole have skyrocketed. And so this created a host of other issues. Frogwares said that as a result, two more reasons for the contract termination emerged. We have completely stopped receiving the royalties that are still being collected on our behalf and owed to us, now amounting to roughly 1 million euros. That is a lot of money that is owed to an indie developer. And then this next bullet point says, the emergency loss explanation actually triggers the force majeure article of our own contract, entitling us to terminate the agreement in case the parties could not minimize the effects of an event of force majeure on this agreement for a period of 60 days. So the argument that the publisher is making about how the pandemic leads to certain legal elements that doesn't allow them to terminate the contract, which again is a BS excuse, turns out that these new enforced regulations also benefit Frogwares, and they have certain termination rights and privileges amidst these circumstances. So Frogwares aptly says that the agreement is therefore terminated without further formality. Moreover, on July 17, 2020, Nacon attempted to oppose the termination in court, but the judge rejected the demand, and the contract is now terminated in the eyes of the law. So yeah, the court has already taken a look at this case and decided Frogwares is in the right. They clearly have the right to terminate the contract given all of the breaches on the part of the publisher. Frogwares continues, however, while there's no need for BBI Nacon to formally acknowledge the termination, the former licensee has created a perception that it is they who still own the Sinking City, and so various partners and platforms are sometimes confused, overly cautious, or preemptively delist the game themselves while dealing with our request to return full control of the game to Frogwares. So BBI Nacon is not not just giving up. They're not just letting Frogwares do what they want with the IP that they legally own. They're still pretending like they are part owners or full owners of the sinking city. And the confusion that this is creating is causing issues with Frogwares' ability to list the sinking city in various retailers, outlets, game sellers, you name it. And this is why Frogwares kind of took the nuclear option, stating that given these breaches, ongoing hurdles, and an unwillingness to cooperate, Frogwares' last resort was to request the removal of the sinking city from any remaining stores to at least halt any further sales going to BBI Nacon. Faced with the situation, we have decided to explain to you why you cannot find the sinking city on certain platforms today. To all the players that wish to buy the sinking city, we are more than willing to have the game be present everywhere and will inform you as we reappear on more platforms on our social media channels. For now, you can now buy a DRM-free PC version of the game from our website here, or through the partners that we ourselves dealt with, such as Origin, or Games Planet, or on Nintendo Switch. And then this last paragraph just says, hey, if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out if you're a journalist who wants to cover this. But this statement explains itself pretty well and really highlights the extent of BBI Nacon's exploitation of indie studio Frogwares. And it's a damn shame that, it isn't just the major big greedy publishers who engage in shady acts. There are mid-tier publishers who are on the lookout for up-and-coming indie developers who seek to exploit them in an attempt to essentially engage in hostile takeovers or to, sell their game without fulfilling their financial obligations to the indie devs. They just straight up take advantage of these indie devs who are driven by passion and who are blindsided by these publishers who exploit and take advantage of that passion. And what especially sucks about all of this is that this isn't the first time that Frogwares has been screwed. Another separate publisher screwed Frogwares over back in September 2019. You may recall that back then, Frogwares published the following statement talking about their relationship with Focus Home Interactive. They said right here that their ability to develop and release games is under threat. Why? Because Focus Home Interactive, the licensee or publisher that was in charge of commercializing these games on these platforms, refuses to transfer the title IDs to us, the creators and IP owners of those titles, even though our publishing and distribution agreement has ended. And then Frogwares added that because according to their official statement sent to us only last week, Focus has put in place a policy in accordance with which they will not transfer any title, the content ID or title ID belonging to any developer which has removed all their games from the Focus catalog. And this is also a situation where the policy is not in any of our previous or existing contracts with Focus, and that has never been applied to us in the past. So this is another case where the publisher decided out of the blue to retroactively change the contract, and that screws the developer in more ways than one. It's just a really crappy situation and incredibly bad luck that Frogwares would face something like this twice in a row. Their bad luck with publishers is something that Frogwares has actually acknowledged when somebody pointed out that the road to self-publishing sounds so rough, but it will be worth it. Frogwares said, thanks, James. We did publish The Sinking City on the Switch ourselves, and we're definitely going to continue on this road with our future games like Sherlock Holmes. That seems like a good idea given their awful luck with publishers. Speaking of the publisher, Nacon has responded with the following statement to the accusations and allegations, stating that a dispute between Nacon and Frogwares over the interpretation of the Sinking City video game publishing agreement is pending before French courts. A decision is not expected for several months. However, Frogwares thought it necessary to anticipate the upcoming ruling by issuing a press release on their website and Twitter feed, which reflects a personal and erroneous interpretation of the content of the agreement and the nature of the dispute. Nacon emphatically rejects this open letter, the terms of which do not square with the facts. Frogwares is seeking to discredit Nacon in the eyes of the public and professionals alike, even going so far as disclosing confidential information, and to jeopardize the distribution of the Sinking City, the development of which was principally funded by Nacon. This behavior, unworthy of any professional, is unacceptable, and Nacon intends to take legal action so as to get them convicted and obtain redress. Nacon is confident about the outcome of the dispute, irrespective of the tricks used by Frogwares to cause them harm. So, on one hand, we have Frogwares, who actually has the receipts for the claims that they're making, and then here we have Nacon just straight up threatening the developer without much in the way of providing details about, what actually happened behind the scenes and any sort of counter arguments to the claims that Frogwares is making. They talk about how, oh, they've released confidential information, but Frogwares has said that the information they've released is stuff that's already public because it's part of court proceedings. And beyond that, they talk about how the development of the sinking city was principally funded by Nacon. That doesn't mean you renege on the terms of the contract. The sinking city is published by Nacon. That doesn't mean you get to be late with your payments. That doesn't mean you get to renege on your obligations and responsibilities as stipulated in the contract. You agreed to fund the game under very specific terms that don't allow you to create a tabletop RPG without Frogwares, the owner of the IP, being aware. Doesn't allow you to remove their logo, their company logo, from the box art, etc. Now, with any situation like this, you gotta give both parties the benefit of the doubt until all of the evidence is looked at and the proper determinations are made. But right now, this is just not a good look for Nacon based on what I'm seeing here. Though time will tell how these court proceedings will eventually pan out, how everything will culminate. Hopefully other prospective up-and-coming indie developers who are seeking a publisher will partner with a company that's more reputable instead of risking their IP to these publishers who are straight up just taking advantage of indie devs and their passion, on top of wasting a whole lot of time with Frogwares having to deal with these legal proceedings instead of focusing on what they actually want to do, which is make games. So that's one man's take on this whole situation. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on this whole Frogware situation, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.